There's a moment in your healing where you feel the shift. The ache doesn't sting like it used to. The silence no longer feels cruel. It feels clean. And just as you're learning to breathe again, there it is. A message, a like, a casual reaction, a shadow of what used to be, drifting back into your world like it never left. It's not an apology. It's not accountability. It's not a real attempt to re-enter with clarity. It's just a whisper. The whisper of someone who once held your heart, and now, after realizing what they carelessly misplaced, is testing the waters. Not with courage, not with purpose, but with hesitation, calculation, and half-hearted reach. That whisper is not love. That whisper is a question. Am I still welcome in the places I walked away from? And this is the moment, not when they return with conviction, but when they return with curiosity. This is the moment that defines whether you reclaim your power or slip back into a version of yourself that waited in quiet desperation for a knock at a door you never should have left open. When someone truly realizes your value, they don't whisper, they don't breadcrumb. They don't send a casual, "How are you?" into the void, expecting an open invitation to the emotional palace they once took for granted. When they truly understand what was lost, they arrive, whole, humble, honest. But what often comes first, before clarity, before true regret, is the test. It looks innocent, almost sweet, a meme, a memory, a passive just checking in. It might even trigger a rush inside you, that old craving to feel seen, remembered, relevant again in someone else's world. But that's not love. That's a radar sweep. That's someone trying to confirm whether your door is still unlocked. Not because they want to come in, but because they want to know they still could. And here's the hard truth most avoid. Silence isn't broken by someone who wants to build. It's often broken by someone who wants to borrow. Borrow comfort, borrow reassurance, borrow emotional security. But they're not bringing tools. They're not here to repair what was broken. They're here to measure what still remains. The moment you receive a subtle check-in, the moment your phone lights up with a name your heart once broke over, you must pause. Not because you're bitter, not because you want revenge, but because you now operate from wisdom, from clarity, from the hard-earned understanding that access to your heart is no longer free. It requires presence, purpose, and proof. Letting someone re-enter your world because they miss you isn't love, it's emotional nostalgia. It's an attempt to soothe their ache, not a commitment to honor yours. And nostalgia is seductive. It wears the perfume of good memories while hiding the scars of what actually happened. It plays old songs, shows old pictures, reminds you of how good it once felt, without ever reminding you of how it ended. So when a subtle message arrives, don't reply immediately. Don't perform. Don't analyze. Don't contort yourself into the most palatable version of who you think they want you to be. Instead, observe. Not them, but yourself. What do you feel? Excitement, validation, fear, hope. Observe the part of you that's still trying to interpret a vague signal as a sign of growth. That's where your healing lives, not in what they sent, but in what you still want it to mean. It's easy to get swept into the rhythm of connection again. Easy to read too much into too little. But growth demands stillness, and stillness gives you space to see clearly. Clarity reveals truth, and the truth is this: someone who wants to be in your life won't test the waters, they'll dive in. Someone who values you doesn't peek through the window. They knock, they wait, they show up again and again, not because they want something from you, but because they want to be with you. Until then, you owe yourself protection, not from them, from your own impulse to mistake a ripple for a wave, a breadcrumb for a feast, a message for a mission. This isn't about closing your heart. It's about refining your filter. It's about asking the harder question. Does this message carry weight? Or is it a recycled pattern dressed up as progress? When you respond too quickly, you train others that your value resets with every message. When you let ambiguity back in, you shrink the space you've carved out for peace. When you interpret subtlety as sincerity, you start performing again. But you're not here to audition. You've already earned your worth. Now you must enforce it. There's nothing wrong with someone wanting to reconnect. People evolve, people regret, people make mistakes and seek redemption. But redemption doesn't come through subtlety. It comes through substance. If someone truly misses you, they don't test. They take a step forward with vulnerability, with clarity, with effort. Not a hey, not a just thought of you, but a wholehearted gesture. Until that arrives, you stay in your center. You don't adjust your energy for fragments. You don't rearrange your heart for ghosts. You don't press pause on your evolution because someone remembered your name in the middle of their loneliness. You rise because you know what's behind that message. You know it's not pure. You know it's not complete. You know it's not real intention. Not yet. And if you respond too soon, too kindly, too openly, you become predictable. Predictability is not the same as emotional safety. It becomes emotional convenience. You weren't put on this earth to be emotionally convenient. You weren't designed to be someone's momentary relief from their own confusion. You're here to be chosen, not when it's easy, not when they're bored, but when they're ready to show up. So you let the check-in come. You let the message arrive. You let the silence be broken, not because it changes you, but because it confirms you. It confirms who still thinks access is a game. It confirms who still moves with half intention. It confirms who still values comfort over courage. And most importantly, it confirms how much you've grown. Growth isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to reply. Sometimes it's the heartbreak of silence over the high of false hope. And the resilience it takes to refuse to reply. Sometimes it's the heartbreak of silence over the high of false hope. But each time you honor your standards, even in the face of old emotions, you rebuild your foundation. Stronger, cleaner, more sacred. You're not hard to reach. You're hard to impress. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not punishing anyone. You're protecting your peace. That message may stir old feelings, but it doesn't own your response. You do. You have nothing to prove. No chase to initiate. No softness to perform on demand. You are allowed to wait for substance. You are allowed to desire presence. You are allowed to say, this isn't enough. Not anymore. And when they come back, if they ever do, they'll know the difference between access and entrance, between nostalgia and devotion, between casual and committed, because you trained them, not by what you said, but by what you no longer accepted. You don't need to declare your standards. You live them. You don't need to explain your silence. It speaks with power. You don't need to decode a message. It decoded them. And in that decoding, you finally see what all of this has taught you. Your time, your heart, your presence, they're not up for negotiation. So the next time you get a subtle check-in, don't get pulled into the past. Get anchored in your present. Remember what you've healed from. Remember what it cost you to arrive here. And then ask yourself the question that saves everything. Is this the return of someone who's grown, or just the echo of someone who hasn't? Because whispers don't rebuild broken bridges. Subtle doesn't hold weight. And missing someone is not the same as being ready for them. Let them test the waters if they must. You don't owe them a lifeline. Not when you've already learned how to swim without one. It always looks different from the outside. You see the photos, the stories, the laughter, the movement, the seemingly uninterrupted rhythm of someone's life continuing without you. And it cuts deeper than you'd care to admit. Because you wonder, how can someone look so alive in a world where you no longer exist? But what you must understand is this: the loudest distractions are often hiding the deepest hollowness. The more desperately someone chases external validation, the more they reveal just how little internal peace they actually have. They may smile, but it's a smile crafted for public consumption, not personal fulfillment. It's curated, it's designed, it's a mask, not a mirror. When someone walks away, especially when it's casual, abrupt, or unexplained, there is a tension that brews in their absence. At first, they feel free, unburdened. They breathe the air of detachment like it's oxygen after suffocation. They may convince themselves they've made the right decision. They may even chase that feeling by leaning into distraction with people, with parties, with performance. But distraction isn't healing. It's anesthesia. And anesthesia always wears off. The pursuit of validation becomes the main act. They post more, party more, connect more. But it's not depth they're after. It's reaction. Because every like, every compliment, every flirtation is an attempt to drown the silence that follows a meaningful loss. The silence that asks difficult questions. What did I walk away from? What did I devalue? What connection did I abandon for the illusion of ease? But those questions don't surface immediately. The questions that light up, first comes the high. And in that high, they collect the moments that make it look like they've moved on. And you, watching from afar, might mistake their noise for confidence, their busyness for peace. You might even begin to question your worth, wondering why your absence feels invisible, why your presence seems to be so easily replaced. But here's the truth. Real connection doesn't vanish. It lingers. It echoes. It leaves fingerprints on the soul. And the harder someone tries to replace that echo with artificial sound, the louder their emptiness becomes. They aren't moving on. They're running away. Not from you, but from the emotional reckoning that comes from losing someone they once had access to, but didn't value enough to hold. External validation is seductive. It promises quick reassurance. It makes you feel important, briefly, but it fades fast, because no amount of attention from strangers can compensate for the absence of authenticity. No amount of new faces can erase the memory of the one who saw you deeply. No party, no praise, no performance can ever satisfy the soul that once felt seen, understood, cherished, and then chose noise over depth. Eventually, distraction becomes exhausting. The high flattens. The novelty wears off. And all that's left is the hollowness they tried to outrun. That's when the realization hits. Not in the middle of the party, but in the quiet that follows. When the phone goes silent. When the dopamine drops. When the compliments lose their sparkle because they're based on a version of self that's being projected, not a self that's truly being known. And I try to align, and that moment, that's the pivot point. That's when they begin to miss not just the connection, but the peace that connection brought. Because peace doesn't come from being seen by many, it comes from being known by one. It doesn't come from attention, it comes from alignment. And when that alignment is gone, the soul begins to ache in a way that can't be numbed by noise. Now, here's what's important. Your power lies in understanding this without needing to witness it. You do not need their realization to validate your worth. You do not need their regret to reinforce your value. Because the moment you begin measuring your healing against someone else's delay, you hand over your growth to someone else's timeline. It is not your responsibility to wait for the hollowness to catch up to someone who chose distraction. It is not your role to be the landing place for someone who only understands your worth after the echo sets in. You are not a test drive they return to once the road gets bumpy. You are not a memory they visit when reality disappoints them. You are a sanctuary, and sanctuaries do not stay open for tourists. Let them run. Let them dance in the glow of fleeting attention. Let them bask in the illusion that they are okay, because all that chasing, all that validating, all that distracting, it's a temporary shield from the truth they will eventually face, that they had something rare and now they don't. But your energy must not orbit their awakening. You must not become the silent observer of their descent, hoping that one day they'll look around and realize you are the peace they're now starving for. That's not healing. That's still performing. You are not built to be someone's consequence. You were built to be your own beginning. So you continue, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You don't compete with the noise. You don't try to be seen again. You don't lower your worth to match their frequency. You rise quietly, consistently,